some Kim from Cordex, and Scott Watt from DNA, and all their respective teams for having us today. We're thrilled to be in Korea with all of you, and like to present a little bit more information about Rchain and why it's cool, why it does what it does, and how it does what it does. And so I'd like to start with a short video that I think will help you to understand the technology. And it's delivered by some of the technologists and the founders of Rchain.
The goal of Rchain in general and the community as a whole is to find new ways to coordinate human activity so that we can be more efficient, more free, that we can have interactions that are more meaningful, and that we can use computer technology and the blockchain to drive our own destiny as opposed to having it come to us from the top down.
So the main issue with blockchains today is that they're not scalable because every node has to process every transaction, as opposed to nodes kind of sharing the load and processing transactions in parallel.
What we need is something that can kind of handle Visa-level transaction rates, about 40,000 transactions per second. And what we got currently is something that's about 2 or 3 orders of magnitude slower than that. Clearly, right? Bitcoin is moving billions of dollars through the network for just this one thing. So it's a pretty good answer. But Ethereum comes along and says we could do better than that. Instead of storing a ledger, let's store the state of a virtual computer.
In Ethereum, it's based on the Turing machine model, where you start an event, it runs to completion, and then it's done.
The next question you want to ask is, well, what kind of virtual computer? Ethereum's answer, unfortunately, makes it so that Ethereum, as it is currently conceived, can't scale. And the reason is because the virtual computer that they pick is sequential, right? One thing at a time. What it would mean is that we would have to serialize all the world's transactions. That's not how the world's financial systems work, and it's not how nature works.
As it stands, right, Bitcoin and Ethereum are both proof-of-work networks, and the proof of work is expensive because you're using thermodynamics to provide you with security. With a proof-of-stake system, we can get all that hardware tasked with actually doing useful work again.
So really, when we're thinking about the kind of scale that we need Facebook and Visa together at the same time. That's what got me into this, and that's what Rchain basically has been set up to do.
So one of the ways that Rchain is trying to move past Ethereum is by providing really good type system in which you can prove that contracts don't have these kinds of races.
So there are 2 major improvements that will shift the structure of the blockchain. One is to improve the consensus algorithm, and the other is to improve the virtual computer.
But we also have a sharding solution, that is dividing up the network into pieces that the whole network doesn't have to know about everything that happens everywhere else. In Rchain, we've got all of these events happening at the same time, and there's no reason that if this one runs first or this one runs first, that we couldn't do it in the other order.
So if you rearrange it so that you have your virtual computer is concurrent from the beginning, and the model of concurrency is already built around a thing that kind of automatically shards, then you get scaling for free.
So it gives you a lot more flexibility in the way that you are constructing your programs and letting them interact with each other.
And I said, well, I have the technology to do that because I have been working with a certain mathematics that I had already taken to commercial scale inside Microsoft, and we've never been able to realize the decentralized nature.
So the reason why Rchain exists, at least from my point of view, is because Greg Meredith couldn't convince Vitalik to use the row calculus virtual machine, and so he had to start his own community blockchain project. The reflexive higher order pi calculus virtual machine is the best virtual machine possible.
So the design of rolling itself originated in a version of pi calculus that Greg Meredith invented called the row calculus. So pi calculus, the only thing you can exchange are names, whereas in the row calculus you can send processes.
The first thing that people will notice about Rchain is that it's inherently concurrent. You get to think about concurrency from the very beginning, that's represented right in the syntax.
So then we undertook the process of converting this 30-year-old C++ code and trying to convert that into a Scala virtual machine.
The beating heart of Rchain is a library called Rspace, which is a database that implements what we call the tuple space. The tuple space in the Rchain programming language is responsible for matching up messages that get sent on channels with code that wants to receive those messages. Everything in Rchain that's computational is modeled as sending messages between processes, and Rspace is what does that.
Like, one of the things I like to say is, I can stand in front of a crowd and with full integrity, we can get to Visa level transaction rates. Why? Because we can build out 40,000 different, what we call namespaces.
Blockchain is coming along at the perfect time, right? Because just as trust in centralized corporate data systems is at its lowest, right? We're now offering the ability to have something that's fundamentally different. A data network that's run by the people for their own benefit, by our own efforts, right? By the software that we write, by the machines that we build and operate, and by the applications that we construct on top of that platform. And I think it's really cool.
Yeah, relax, know what's in charge.
So, those are the founders and the computer scientists and the technicians that are behind Rchain. So I felt like they could have explained it much better than I can, and it's important for you to understand why Rchain is important to the industry and why we are here, and why you need to know about Rchain. So I appreciate on a Sunday afternoon that you take the time to be with us today, and we'll go through some of the details. I'd like to start off with introducing some of the team. And you saw Greg Meredith, and Greg is a mathematician by training and a computer scientist who spent many years at Microsoft working on the BizTalk server and created some of the technology, the early blockchain technology before we were even talking about blockchain. So Greg has been the leader of Rchain and really driving the technology. The other person that I think is critically important is a gentleman by the name of Vlad Zamfir. So how many of you have heard of Vitalik Buterin? Raise your hand. Okay. How many have heard of Vlad Zamfir? Not many. But Vlad actually is the computer scientist behind Ethereum. So he's the lead researcher for the Ethereum Foundation. He is, Vitalik is the face of Ethereum, and most people don't see Vlad in the background, but Vlad is one of the leading computer scientists in the world. He created Casper, which is a proof-of-stake consensus algorithm. And he went to Vitalik and basically said, we need to implement Casper, but it couldn't. Ethereum doesn't scale. And so he basically went to Greg Meredith and said, listen, we're going to work together, and we're going to build a proof-of-stake Casper algorithm that actually will scale, because Ethereum just can't get it done. And it's the way that it's constructed. So Vlad is critically important to our project, and he is the head of research for Rchain, as well as a member of the board of directors. So we're absolutely thrilled to have him on our team, and I think you're going to be hearing a lot more about Vlad in the coming months and years. So the next person is Dr. Mike Stay, and Mike is a mathematician by training and a computer scientist from Google, and he is leading the development team that is producing the technology behind Rchain. So those are probably three of the most important names associated with the project. So at this point, we're going to take a little bit of a turn and dive into the technology, and I wanted to introduce Jonathan Kochmer. And Jonathan works for Rchain. He's the head of global business development, and he went to Singapore about 6 months ago for a conference and never left. So Asia really is an important community for Rchain, and we're happy to have him here with us today. And so, Jonathan, if you'd like to come up and talk about the technology.
How about you go ahead to the business stuff, then I'll consolidate all the technology.
Okay, sure. Well, all right. So I'm going to fast forward here for a second, and we'll talk about quickly the ecosystem that we are developing. So I'm a general partner at a venture capital firm up in Seattle called Reflective Ventures. Reflective has partnered with Rchain, and we are the ecosystem development fund that has funded many projects that are building on the Rchain platform. Last week in Berlin, Germany, we were fortunate enough to launch our testnet, and all of these companies, we have invested in 23 application companies to date, and all of these companies are now starting to build their smart contracts and their DApps to run on the testnet, which is now live. And I won't go through each of their names, but at any rate, they're some of the greatest projects out, and they're up and coming and really exciting. But they're real world use cases for the Rchain technology. Most of these companies require high throughput, scalability, all of the things that Rchain can offer. So we'll go through the timeline just to kind of give you an idea of where we came from and where we are today, and sort of our roadmap. So we started back in early 2017, developed the white paper, worked with Greg to develop the plan and idea for Rchain. In August and then again in December, we did 2 private token sales, raised about $30 million US, which is paid primarily for the development. We currently have around 40 full-time developers, decentralized, scattered around the world, and those funds have been used to support those initiatives. In January, we launched Reflective Ventures, and again, Reflective is the ecosystem development fund that is supporting the projects that are building on top of Rchain. As I mentioned, in September, we launched our testnet, and we anticipate launching our mainnet in Q1 of 2019. We expect to be feature complete around December 1st of this year, and that would give us approximately 3 months for testing of our technology, testing of the code, and looking for bugs, and doing the stress testing that's needed before we launch it, before we launch our mainnet. So I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan at this point, and then I'm going to come back and say a few closing remarks.